Welcome to video 6. In this video, we're going to be modeling out all of the aesthetic button features, and this part's going to be a lot easier because we don't need to worry about being so perfect. So let's start. Open up the file from where we left off in video 5. The first thing I'm going to do is save this down in the video 6 content folder, and I'll version up. There you go. Activate the visibility for the buttons folder, and let's have a look at them. If you double click a group locator, you'll select all the items within that group locator. Let's have a look at these buttons. The first thing you'll notice is that they are slightly off center, and that happened when we moved the front part of our enclosure forward by 3/4 of a millimeter. So let's move the buttons 1/2 of 3/4 of a millimeter. So I'll activate the move tool by hitting W, and let's just punch in 0.75 divided by 2. And that should move everything back into place. All right, make sure you only have the mesh item layer that you want to work on selected, and we'll start with the power button. So I want to extrude these polygons downward, and I want that extrusion to be normal to the surface of these polygons. So I'm going to pop into a selection action center. Then I can just hit Shift X and then click in the viewport and drag my extrusion down. Now I don't need these bottom polygons, so I'll just select them and delete them. And then I'll grab these top edges, deselect these edges, and I'm going to bevel this with a round of 2. Now you can take some artistic license on these parts. If you want a chamfer, if you want a different kind of round, go for it. All right, that looks good. I'm just going to move it up a little bit. Let's look at a front view and move those into place, and I think that looks fine. All right, I'll put this at the top because this one's done. Let's work on the push to talk button, which is on the side here. So if you look at the reference images, you can see, let's go to a front view. You can see there's this extra edge here, and that's meant to be coming from the actual enclosure on the front and back pieces to wrap around this button. And we'll add that in as soon as we model out the button. So let's go to a perspective view. The other thing is, all this extra geometry now is kind of getting in the way, and it makes it hard to see. So I'll show you a little trick. If you go into items mode and hit Shift H, that will hide everything else in the item tree. You can always hit U to bring everything back, unhide. So Shift H will hide these while we work on this particular piece. All right, so I'm going to hit B for bevel, and I'll bevel out these polygons out just a little bit. Actually, let's make sure we drop our action center first. It's a good habit. B for bevel, click, and then let's drag this out. All right, I'm going to grab these front polygons here, and I'll bevel these inwards a little bit. Shift click, and I'll bevel them in a little bit more, and then drag these in like so. Maybe not so far, just like that. Let's bring back the other items here, and I'll see what this looks like subdivided. That's close. I'm going to add some supporting geometry to round these edges here. So I'll hit B for bevel. I'll just set my round level to 1, and I'll round these edges out just a bit, like so. That looks a lot better. This button's way too far out though, so let's move it inwards into the enclosure a little bit. That looks good. Now let's select the front and back piece. I'll pop into face mode here. It's a bit easier to select things. And I'll grab these polygons all the way around our push to talk button. Make sure you don't make any accidental selections. There we go. I'll hit B for bevel, and I'll just bevel these out like so. Maybe a little bit less. Let's look at the reference image. That looks about right. And then I'll move my push to talk button out a little bit. Like so. All right, let's grab the front and back piece, go into Catmull Clark, and let's see, I'm actually going to move those faces out a little bit more. So I'll come into a front view and just select all of these front faces and move them out just a little bit more. Great. I'm not even going to add any extra supporting geometry around this piece. I like the round that is being created rather organically here, so that looks good to me. All right, let's move on to the volume slider. This polygon got a little out of whack when we moved these vertices on the front and back parts to match the parting line on the right side of the enclosure. So we'll just move them back right now and we'll eyeball it because, again, we don't really need to be perfect with these pieces. They're gonna look fine anyway. All right, that looks good. Let's go into perspective mode. I'll move this in a little bit, B for bevel, and let's move these polygons forward just a little bit. Spacebar to drop the tool. I'll pop into items mode really quickly just to hide everything else. And let's take a look at this. I want to create two little bumps on either side. And so I'm going to need some edge loops, but an add loop or a loop slice isn't going to slice through this because this is actually a large n-gon. So if we try, and I'll show you, Alt C, it's not going to slice all the way through. So we need to resolve this n-gon a little bit. So I'm going to cut. So I'm going to cut from here to here. And I'll do the same on the bottom. And that should resolve things. Alt C, a count of 2 in symmetry mode. And again, I don't have dimensions for these things. You can just choose what looks good to you. I'll grab these, hit B for bevel, and bevel them out just a touch, like so. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, now grab these edges here and all the way around, and we'll round these a little bit. I'll set my round level to 2, and we'll just add a bit of a round. I think that looks good. And now we just need to add the supporting geometry, and this piece will be finished. So I'll grab these polygons here, and we'll do a poly inset bevel to add supporting geometry, like so. I'll add edge loops. Let's see, I did that wrong. So I'll add edge loops to support these edges here. I'll need 2 more here. And I think 1 more loop, like so. Let's maybe bring these ones in. Great. You know what? Let's leave them there. It's looking a little too sharp. Okay, you can see the round at the top and the bottom of our volume slider isn't looking so round. We have these little kinks on either side, and that's because this supporting edge is way too close to these edges. So let's slide this edge down to give it some room, and we'll slide this edge up. Shift Tab. There, that looks a lot better. And let's bring back our enclosure, unhide with U. And let's look at this placement from the front. I think that's a little too far out. So let's move this in like so. And I think that looks fine. Next up is the screen. The screen is easy. So let's move these polygons back just a little bit. Then I'll grab this polygon, Shift G to select all of the polygons, hit B for bevel, click once, and then drop the tool. then hit W to activate the Move tool, and we'll move these on the Z axis. The polygon bevel would have extruded everything on their normals, and this face would have ended up bigger and no longer in line with our through hole cutout. So that is why I did it that way. Now let's hit B for bevel and add some supporting edges to the screen here. Spacebar to drop the tool. And I'll add a single supporting loop here. Spacebar to drop the tool. Of course, you don't need supporting geometry to polygons that don't have faces on the back like this. There's no edges pulling this edge in either direction, so it holds up just fine as is. Let's see, I think I want this to be a little bit further back to be inset, just so there's a bit of a lip there, maybe a little more. There we go. All right, so let's do the LED light next. That is up here. I'll grab this and move it back and hit B for bevel, and let's drag this out just a little bit. So the way I want this to look, I want it to look like there's a ring of plastic here with an LED light inset that's meant to turn on when the push to talk button is pressed. So just follow with me here. I'm going to hit B for bevel to do a bit of an inset, and I'll do a bunch of shift clicks with the bevel tool to model this shape out. So I'll hit shift click, and each step is a shift click to reactivate the bevel tool. So this can go rather quickly once you get the hang of it. Now you know the drill, we have to add supporting geometry. I'll let you do it. I won't keep repeating Alt-C and add loop over and over again. All right, I think that piece looks pretty good. I think I want actually that center piece to be a little bit bigger. Pop into a front view, and I'll just select it. Yeah, that looks a lot better to me. All right, let's do the ports panel. And it is over here, but before we do that, select the back and front enclosure piece, pop into face mode, and you can see that we forgot to connect these two edges here. So let's just do that right now. Okay, that looks good. Grab the ports mesh, and we're going to cut out a headphone jack and a mini USB port here. And we'll do that with some extra geometry that we'll place in a new mesh layer. So hit N to create a new mesh layer, and then let's go to a right view. Let's do the headphone jack first. So select the cylinder tool primitive here, and I know that the radius of a headphone jack is 1.75 millimeters, and how convenient, it's already placed for me here. So I'll just apply this tool. You can see it's there. Make sure you have a face count that's pretty low, like 8, like I have. And now I'm going to shape out the mini USB port. So I know the basic dimensions of this, so I'll just punch those in here. It is about 6.8 millimeters long and 3 millimeters tall. spacebar to drop the tool. I'll grab these two edges and add two edges like so. Scale this inwards and move this edge down just a little bit. Let's see, let's move this to be with the other guy like that. And I'll give it some thickness. So I'm going to extrude this so there's a front and back to it. And now let's put these in place. So let's go to a right view and go into items mode and grab the mesh and the ports, shift hide so that we just have those to look at. That'll make things a lot easier. I'll grab the mesh here and move it into place. I think I want these a little bit further apart. Make sure I select all the polygons a little bit further apart, and let's center these by snapping to these 2 points. There we go. All right, and we'll also have to put them into place from the front view. Just make sure that they're going through the mesh polygon that we have for the port layer. All right, I'll drop the tool. I'll come over to the ports item layer and let's go to mesh edit, solid drill. We want our operation to be a tunnel operation. Our driving mesh will be a specific surface item, and we'll select that extra mesh that we made and hit OK. You can see that it cut out those shapes into our polygon. We can now delete that mesh layer. We won't need it anymore. And let's add some supporting geometry with a poly bevel. So we'll drag this in just a little bit, and you can see that our polygon is starting to break apart. And that's because we need to divide it up a little bit. It can't really bend one polygon around this whole shape. Spacebar to drop the tool. Let's just cut up this polygon a little bit, and you'll see it already has settled a little bit. That looks all right. C for cut once more. And I'm going to relocate this edge. So C for cut. All right, so our headphone jack looks decent, and this guy looks like a blob. So we need to fix that, but I don't really want to go through all the effort of figuring out how to return this to quads so that it's perfectly modeled out. It's just an aesthetic placeholder, so we're going to do something else. So let's just cut this up just a little bit more, and then I'll show you what we're going to do. We'll need to add some thickness first. So Shift X to extrude, and we'll move these polygons back. Make sure that you do an edge or a polygon extrude, not an edge extrude like I've done here. Let me go back. Shift X. There we go. All right, so let's support these edges. Grab all these edges in the corner that would need extra supporting edges. No, we don't need that much. Let's just select these edges and these edges. You don't even need to select those back edges. I'm going to delete this whole face when we're done. These two. There we go. So pop back into our smoothing mode and come up to vertex map edge weight tool. And we'll just click in the viewport. You can see that I have show weight visible, and already our edges are popping back into shape. So I'm going to set a value. I think only 15 will do because we're going to add a few more edges that'll help this out, but that's already looking a lot better. So in face mode, let's go to a right view, here's a new tool, hit Shift C, and then you can cut square through your model with this edge here. If you go into a snapping mode, let's hit X to go into snapping, this will snap to a straight line. So Shift C and draw out an edge. There you go. Shift C, you can do the same thing again. Just by holding Shift, sorry, you can reactivate the tool rather easily. And I'm gonna do one more right through the middle here, like so. Now let's have a look. Yeah, I think that's looking much better. We need to add supporting inline edges on the inside, of course, so I'll add some loops. Okay, next let's delete this back face here. So I'll just grab all of these polygons at once and delete them. There's one other problem with our shape, and that is once we look at this with the rest of the pieces, I'll just hit U to unhide them. And I'll just select the front and back face here. You can see that you could just see right through our product, and that doesn't look right at all. So we're going to put in some temporary geometry behind here to act as a blocker so that when we look at it from this angle, it's not going to look so strange and hollow. So I'll create a new mesh layer. Let's go to a right view again and select the cube primitive here, and we'll just draw out a little rectangle like so. Let's go to a front view. Put this in place. Make sure it's overlapping that geo just a little bit. Spacebar to drop the tool. And let's see, let's grab that mesh. See what this looks like. I think I'll move that forward just a little bit. That looks about right. So I'll call this mesh blocker, I guess port blocker, and I'll parent it to the ports panel. All right, all that's left is the channel switch and the antenna. So let's do the channel switch first. The channel switch is pretty easy. It's just meant to fit underneath the enclosure. There'd probably be some sort of rotational axis here so that the switch could flip back and forth. We're not going to worry about any of that. Hit Alt-C to create two edge loops here, like so. And hit B for bevel and drag these polygons up just a little bit. Let's look at this from a front view. I think we're going to have to widen this a little bit. So I'll move these polygons out like so. And I want this surface to be a nice round surface. So let's add some edge loops to the center here and here. And let's see, I'm going to add one more loop before we round this edge up here. Grab these polygons, hit B for bevel, pull this out just a little bit like so. And let's see, I think I'll move these edges down a little bit. Sort of, okay. Let's grab these polygons here and flatten them for now. Then we're going to add a fall off, a linear fall off, and set the symmetry value here to end, and we'll set this to ease out. Now hit W to activate the tool. Oh, I apologize. Let's set this to ease in. I always get those messed up. All right. So, and then we want this on the Z axis. So now we can just pull those polygons up. And you can see it creates a nice little round for us. Escape to drop the tool. Front view. I think that's a little too high now. So we'll just move them down. Okay. Now, of course, this is going to need some supporting geometry, so let's just handle that right now. I'll grab two edges, Alt-C. And I'll just go in here and manually add some supporting loops around this whole shape. If you look at it from a left view, you'll see that it's a little bit too wide. So we'll narrow it out. So I'll select these verts. Okay, and from a top view, you can see that this no longer fits very well in our through hole, so I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. There we go. All right, next up is the antenna. The antenna is definitely a little bit trickier. So let's grab these polygons, move them straight down a little bit. Hit B for bevel, click once, drop the tool, and then move this selection up. Let's look at it from a front view, and let's flatten all these. If you look at it from a top view, you can see that we no longer have a round shape. So let's go to the Deform tab and activate the Radial Align tool. Make sure that you don't accidentally add a transform, and I'll set the angle to 0. Let's turn on snapping. So make sure that your angle is set to 0, and I'm just going to snap this so that it lines up with the center of the center point beneath it. That looks all right, and I'll scale it in quite a bit. So this is going to overlap the enclosure afterwards. So I'm not too worried about not being too close to this edge here. I'd like to match this angle though. So I'll scale it in just a little bit more. Yeah, that looks good. Just going to delete these edges for now. They are not going to be of much use when we create this rounded top later on. So B for bevel, let's bring this in, say 0.35, shift click, let's move this up, 0.35, shift click, out, negative 0.35, shift click again. Let's look at the reference image here. To about there, bevel inwards, 0.35, shift click, all All right, the last one, let's bring this all the way up to the very top of this. And then select those edges at the very top, hit B for bevel, make sure you have a round level of 2, and then just drag out a dome shape like so. Excellent. Now I said that this bottom part was going to be overlapping our enclosure, so I'll do that right now. Go to add loop and add a loop so it's just sort of above our enclosure like so. And then select a loop of polygons and hit B for bevel, and let's bevel these out so that they overlap like so. Now, I wanted to maintain my original diameter up here, so I'm actually going to delete the polygons that I have selected, and I'll delete these polygons as well. Then I'll just grab this edge and then my original edge and bridge between the two like that. Now I'm going to grab these edges and we're going to use our mesh constraints again. So activate the mesh constraint by hitting background and make sure you have your background constraint, geometry constraint set to vector, and then we'll select an selection action center and then just move these down like so. Spacebar to drop the tool, and make sure you drop your constraint as well. Okay, that looks good. Now we're going to create this cutout shape in the antenna. So let's go to a front view and we're going to add a loop at the bottom of this curve here, and then we'll just delete all of these polygons like so. Backspace, delete. And then let's grab these verts like so. And we'll use another fall off. Go linear fall off. We don't want it symmetric, so set that to none and set this to ease out. Hit W for move and make sure this is on the right axis. Let's reverse this. Let's go to a front view and move up those verts to match that curve like so. Spacebar to drop the tool, escape to drop the fall off, and I'm going to move these verts up so that they're up here. That looks better. Shift C, I'm going to cut right through here. Spacebar to drop the tool, and I'll move these new verts down just a little bit. Like so. Okay, so let's patch things up a bit. Let's create a bridge between these two. Bridge. Oh, turn off auto connection. And I'll just give it 2 segments like that. P for polygon. And P for polygon. Now let's grab all of these polygons and create an inset bevel to support these edges, just like that. And then I'm going to start reconnecting some of these edge loops. Let me redo that inset bevel after I reconnect the edges. I think that'll look a little bit better. We need to cut this top polygon in half. C for cut. And let me delete this polygon. and this polygon. Let's try that again. B for bevel. All right, let's drag these edges in like so. There we go, that looks a lot better. And let's see. See how this looks. I'd like this to match the round of this part of the antenna a little bit more. So I think I'll do that by sliding these edges up just a little bit. And I'll move them down and in just a little bit. Same with these ones. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. All right, so we'll add some more supporting geometry around the shape of our cutout here, and I'll do that manually. So I'll grab, let's see, this polygon, this edge here, and I'll take this to here and bring this all the way around. And then I'll take this one all the way around as well. And let's see, we've got some polygons here, or some triangles here. Let's see, I'll take this up to here. There we go. And then I'll just delete these edges here. Delete this edge, and then I'll just take this one around a second time. Okay, let's go to front view. I'm going to cut this right here. All right, so let's add the supporting geometry needed for these little inset cuts here. So I'll add a loop here, and then I'll use Alt-C to create the rest of my loops. I won't keep repeating myself, so I'll just let you follow along with this part. All right, I think everything is holding up quite nicely. Let's take a look at this together. So if you hit O on your keyboard, go to inactive meshes and then make inactive same as active. We can look at everything at once. Let's make sure our front and back are smoothed like everything else, including the power button. I think everything is looking quite nice. So I want to talk about one more thing before I save and move on to the next video, and that is centers. So each mesh layer is a container for polygons, edges, and verts, but there's another element to it. Every item has a pivot and a center, but we'll just worry about the centers. So the center for this power button is here at the center point, and all of them are at the center point. But we're going to move the centers for each of the buttons to be at the center point of the geometry. So let's grab all of these mesh item layers, make sure that we're in items mode, and then go to Edit, Center to Bounding Box, Center. Now let's look at the center points, and you can see that they've all moved. And now that they're at the center point, you'll see that the transform position on an items level is now mixed. Each one now has this position. So if I were to zero this out, you can see that that button moves to the world origin. And if we take all of these and zero their position, this is now their default position. So if you were to move these in items mode, not polygons mode, if you were to move these in items mode, let's see, like the antenna, and you wanted to put things back, you could just zero out these values. This would be useful for, say, doing an exploded view of your product. All right, that's all I'm going to show you. Don't forget to save, and I will see you in video 7.